sacred mountain no one is allowed to climb, with a temple said to hold incredible secrets at its base. Hidden caves, top secret ancient archives, these are forbidden archaeological sites experts are not allowed to enter. Mount Kailash in Tibet is one of the most mysterious and sacred mountains in the world. It's considered the spiritual center of the universe by Hindus and Buddhists. In fact, it's so sacred that no one is allowed to climb it. The locals firmly believe that attempting to scale it would bring bad luck or even total disaster. There's also a temple at the base of the mountain which is said to hide all sorts of secrets. As for what those secrets could be, ancient artifacts, powerful relics, who knows, but some say it's all buried underneath. Unfortunately, we'll probably never know because no one's allowed to go searching for it. The Tibetans hold it in such high regard that they've kept the area mostly off limits for centuries. It's much more than an archaeological site, it's a forbidden zone that explorers and historians can only dream of digging into. Moving on to the Mogao grottos in China, which are literally full of ancient art that dates back over 1,000 years. These caves are a time capsule filled with statues, murals, and scrolls shedding a lot of light on the history of Buddhism. The cave complex has over 700 caves, and a lot of them are carved into the cliffside and feature art depicting centuries of religious history. And yes, you can visit parts of this site, but some of these caves are completely off limits. And why is that? Well, because they're delicate. Some of the artwork in there is extremely fragile, and one thing people are just great at is ruining things. Too many mouth-breathing tourists start trudging through the place, and before you know it, there's Cheeto stains on the 1,000-year-old Buddha statue. Some of the caves have actually been sealed shut, and even some of the researchers who studied the site haven't had access to them. There's a lot we don't know about what's hidden deep inside the caves. What if it's not just fragile stuff though? What if there could be more? Now we're talking about something that's a little more modern, but still totally forbidden: the Vatican's secret archives. If you didn't know, the Vatican has an enormous collection of ancient documents, and manuscripts, and records that go back hundreds, even thousands of years. Things that are either so important or rare that they're kept locked up in an area of the Vatican that most people can't even get close to. The archives aren't just secret in the sense of having stuff hidden away. This is a literal vault where even some of the most famous historians and scholars can only access documents after being vetted and approved by the Vatican itself. And I gotta believe there's someone breathing down their neck when they're in there too. Some pieces of history have been made public over time, but a lot of what's in the archives are still heavily guarded. Who knows what's in there? Let your imagination run wild. Some think that documents related to the early church, lost historical accounts, or details about some of the more controversial events in history could be locked away in there. But unless you become Pope one day, you'll probably never get the chance to find out. And I'm not exaggerating. Some historians have spent years trying to get permission to just crack open a handful files. Next up, we have China's famous terracotta army. You've probably heard of this, the thousands of life-size statues built to guard the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor. We've all seen images, we've all heard stories, but the emperor's tomb has never actually been excavated. It's been sealed for thousands of years, and while researchers have examined the army, they've never actually gotten to look inside the burial chamber of the emperor himself. The tomb is said to be packed with treasure though, and historical artifacts. Who knows what else? But here's why we still can't get in. There are a couple reasons. For one, there's fear it could be damaged. The tomb is said to be full of mercury, which was thought to protect the emperor in the afterlife, so excavating it could cause chemical reactions that would completely ruin the site. In fact, when they've dug around, they've found signs of dangerous mercury levels. And then there's the fear of booby traps. Legend has it that the emperor rigged up all these deadly traps so that his tomb wouldn't be disturbed, and some archaeologists still fear that some of these traps may be active. So even though we're all dying to know what's inside, it's not happening, at least not anytime soon. I always love saying this one, Saksai Waman. No, I'm not talking to the female members of the audience, although I'm sure you're all lovely. Saksai Waman is a stone structure that sits above Cusco, Peru, said to be one of the most amazing examples of Inca engineering. The site's made up of these huge stones, some weighing over several tons, fitted together so perfectly you can't slip a piece of paper between them, and we don't really know how the Incas moved these massive stones and placed them so perfectly like that. Some people believe there's still more buried at the site that hasn't been uncovered. Archaeologists have spent years studying it, but there are sections that are completely off limits. Some of the surrounding areas are sacred to the local people, and authorities have restricted access to these spots. One restricted area is called Chinkana, a long underground cave said to connect the fortress to the Temple of the Sun. But it's also possible there's some other stuff hidden beneath the earth that no one's dug up yet. Could there be more ancient tunnels or artifacts from lost civilizations that lived even before the Incas? Well, unless more excavation is ever allowed, we'll never really know. The Library of Alexandria was once one of the greatest centers of learning in the ancient world. Scrolls from all over the world filled with knowledge from the greatest minds of the time. But as legend has it, the library was destroyed in a series of disasters. All that knowledge just poof, vanished. Some people believe that there might still be remnants of the library buried beneath the streets of Alexandria, but since the original site was destroyed, digging there is no easy feat. Archaeologists can't just go around tearing up city blocks looking for ancient scrolls, as much as I'm sure they'd love to. Because Egypt is protective of its historical sites, it's nearly impossible for any expert to get permission to dig in the exact spots where the library might have been. But the idea that there's this entire lost collection of scrolls containing the wisdom of ancient civilizations just waiting to be found is a pretty fun idea and would make for a great Indiana Jones movie. Alright, now we're heading into real conspiracy theory territory. Antarctica. Yes, I am talking about pretty much the entire continent. Is it weird to call Antarctica an archaeological site? Maybe, but so much of it is unexplored and off limits. You also have a surprising amount of people who believe that ancient civilizations once existed there long before it froze over. Some explorers have claimed to find evidence of ancient structures buried beneath the ice, but again, Antarctica is mostly off limits to outsiders. Only certain countries are allowed to explore it, and even then, they can only study certain parts of the continent. The global treaty that governs the exploration of Antarctica has strict rules about what can and can't be explored, and there's been very little effort to dig deeper into these quote-unquote mysteries. Some also say there's stuff like hidden technology and pyramids beneath the ice, but because of the restrictions, it's hard to know for sure. Scientists seem to be more focused on studying the environment there, so it's going to take a lot to convince anyone to actually go digging for ancient civilizations, unless that hasn't already been going on and things aren't being covered up. The Bosnian pyramids are pretty controversial. Now I know what you're probably thinking. What do you mean pyramids in Bosnia? Well, some people believe that this set of mountains are actually man-made pyramids. Supposedly, if these pyramids really do exist, they're ancient, older than the Egyptian ones, and contain mysteries that could change our understanding of human history. Of course, the scientific community is pretty split on whether or not these pyramids are actually a thing. Some say they're just natural rock formations. Others insist they're evidence of some ancient construction. All the same, the site is mostly off limits for mainstream excavation. Local authorities have kept the area restricted, and there are some serious debates over whether or not it should be explored. Some argue that the whole thing could be an elaborate hoax, but either way, the site is basically forbidden for archaeologists. Mount Shasta in California is obviously gorgeous, but there's said to be a laundry list of weird things about it. The mountain's been tied to all sorts of strange legends. Supposedly, there's a lost civilization that lives deep beneath it. There have been lots of UFO sightings, and while locals might share their own theories about what's beneath the surface, access to Mount Shasta is strictly controlled. People claim there are these hidden caverns and ancient structures inside the mountain, but so far, no one's been allowed to explore the mountain's more remote areas. There's also a deep spiritual significance for Native American tribes in the area, which has led to even more restrictions on excavation. But before you go yelling at me in the comments about how you've been here before, so it's not off limits, yes, people are free to hike a lot of the area, but getting anywhere near the more mysterious parts of it, not so much. Finally, we have the Cave of Mummies in Guanajuato, Mexico. This cave is home to some of the best preserved mummies you'll ever see. The mummies were naturally preserved in the cave's dry environment, and a lot of them look eerily lifelike. Sounds weird to say lifelike when they are indeed corpses of actual people, but I mean some of them almost look like they'll just open their eyes and start walking away. Archaeologists have been allowed to study the mummies, but there's a catch. Only a select few have been able to go inside the actual cave. Many parts of the site are restricted because of how delicate the mummies are, but it's not just the mummies that are interesting, it's also the cave itself. Some think there may be more bodies hidden deeper inside the cave that haven't been uncovered yet. So what else could be lurking in the darkness? Well, unless you get special access, you'll never know for sure. Ancient tombs built high on mountains in Peru, completely off limits to the public. A mysterious castle in Turkey where strange rituals were said to have taken place. And a haunted Mayan cave. These are forbidden archaeological sites experts aren't allowed to enter. Los Pinchados is an archaeological site in Peru known for its ancient tomb. It's found in Rio Abacio National Park, high up in the mountains, where at one time the Chachapoya people lived. Chachapoya may loosely translate to the cloud forest, which would make sense. They built their tombs in caves high on the cliffs, way above the jungle floor. This, of course, made them difficult to reach, protecting the graves from harsh weather and looters. These tombs, which hold human remains and artifacts, have only been seen by a handful of archaeologists since the site was rediscovered in the 80s. It's remote and it's hard to get to, which is one reason why the site is so mysterious. The government also made Los Pinchados a protected area in 1990, so it's closed off to the public. On top of that, the area is home to rare animals like the yellow-tailed woolly monkey. Just another reason why the government doesn't want tons of tourists flocking to the area and disrupting it. Zerzevan Castle is an ancient fortress in southeastern Turkey built around 2,000 years ago. It was originally used by the Roman Empire, strategically placed to control the area and protect it from invaders. The site is also important because it was part of the ancient Roman road network, connecting the empire's eastern territories. But what's probably the most intriguing part of Zerzevan Castle is the discovery of a Mithraic temple. Mithraism was an ancient religion practiced by Roman soldiers, and the temple at Zerzevan is one of the best preserved examples of its kind. Inside the temple, archaeologists have found inscriptions and carvings related to the worship of Mithras, a god associated with light and truth. Makes this site pretty special, because there aren't many Mithraic temples still intact today. But there's more to this place than just being an interesting historical site. For a long time, there have been rumors surrounding the ruins. Some people claim that well-known US families, often ones mentioned in conspiracy theories, once visited the temple where they took part in secret rituals. But is that just an urban legend? Maybe. Good luck finding out for yourself though, because access to the site is restricted. Cactus Hill is an archaeological site in Virginia. It's pretty important when it comes to understanding the early history of humans in North America. It's believed to be one of the oldest places where humans lived in the Americas, dating back over 18,000 years. That's a really long time ago, during the Ice Age. Archaeologists have found tools and signs of ancient campsites here, showing that people lived in the area long before many researchers originally thought. The site is in a sandy area, which helped preserve tools and artifacts. Most of these are made of flint, showing that the people at Cactus Hill were hunter-gatherers, using these tools to hunt and survive. Cactus Hill is off limits to the public. Only researchers with special permission can dig or study it. The National Archives in the United States is home to some of the country's most important historical documents. It holds records like the US Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights, and a lot of the documents in the archives are not for public viewing. One of the most famous restricted documents is the JFK assassination files. While some information about President Kennedy's death has been revealed to the public, a lot of files remain classified to this day. The documents are carefully guarded, and only certain government officials or historians with specific clearance can access them. Files related to the development of nuclear weapons during the Cold War are also tightly controlled. The archives itself has areas that are closed off to protect sensitive materials. Some documents are too fragile to be handled or displayed even, and access is only granted to experts who are trained in preservation techniques. Sac Oyum, also known as the Haunted Maya Cave, sits near the ancient Maya city of Mayapan in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. It's a flooded cenote or sinkhole. that many locals avoid going anywhere near and will also warn outsiders to stay away from too. Based on it being known as a haunted cave, you can probably guess why. The place has a pretty eerie reputation. The area is so feared that even some archaeologists are hesitant to explore it. The place is full of bones, some animal, some human. As for why, well, the Maya may have used it for ritual purposes, or it may have just been a place where they'd bury some of their dead. Are there really that many bones down there though? Enough that it's known to be haunted? Well, a recent underwater survey led by archaeologist Bradley Russell uncovered a lot of remains scattered across 2 chambers. A lot of their skulls showed signs of having been deformed, which was a common practice among the Maya, but these weren't ordinary burials. The cenote is near the edge of Mayapan, and experts believe the bones might belong to people who were outcasts, possibly plague victims, deliberately kept away from the rest of the population. Seems to explain the trepidation people have towards the cenote today. Back in the day, no one wanted to drink the water and risk contamination, and that dread surrounding the place was just passed down generation to generation. But there's more than just skeletons here. There are also legends of a monstrous feathered serpent with a horse's head who guards the cenote. Niihau is a small private island off the coast of Hawaii. It's often called the Forbidden Island because it is. The island is privately owned by the Robinson family, and visitors are very rarely allowed, and I mean rarely. The few people who live there are mostly native Hawaiians who've lived on the island for generations, and they follow a very traditional lifestyle. The Robinsons don't want outside influences changing their way of life, so they've kept the island almost completely off limits. Even scientists and archaeologists have trouble getting permission to explore it, and the rich and famous even. Mick Jagger was famously denied access to the island. You won't find any hotels or shops here, and visitors are only allowed if they're invited, which is usually for specific reasons like research. And there are a lot of people who are just dying to do that research. There's some pretty cool things to see here, apparently, because I've never been. There are ancient Hawaiian petroglyphs here, and because the island is so isolated, it's helped preserve a lot of the historical sites, and the animals must think it's just heaven. Diego Garcia is a remote island in the British Indian Ocean Territory. It's one of the most tightly controlled and mysterious places on Earth. In the 70s, the British and US governments forcibly removed the local population to make way for this massive American military base, and ever since, the island has been fully restricted to outsiders, giving rise to a whole whack load of conspiracy theories, mainly that the government does some really bad stuff here, and I would not be surprised in the slightest. One of the most likely rumors is that the island was used by the CIA for secret rendition programs, where prisoners were kidnapped and tormented in hidden locations. The UK government addressed the issue and outright denied these claims, but they also stated 3 years later that 2 CIA torture flights did land on the island, but the documents related to this have been lost due to water damage. So yeah, that's reassuring. Not. Barren Island, part of India's Andaman and Nicobar Islands, is off limits to most visitors. It's the only active volcano in India, and one of the few along a stretch of volcanoes from Sumatra to Myanmar. The island erupted violently in 1991, wiping out a whole swath of local wildlife, so since then, access to the island has been restricted for safety reasons. Now, while you can't land on Barren Island itself, you can take a boat or ferry to see it from a safe distance. The biggest concern for keeping the island off limits is the risk from the active volcano that's on it. Explosions could happen at any time. The best time to visit the surrounding islands is between December and April, when the sea is calm, but don't expect to step foot on Barren Island itself. It remains a dangerous, protected spot with only a few allowed to study it up close. Castle Guard Cave in Banff National Park in Alberta is Canada's longest cave, and it's mostly off limits. The cave is huge and reaches deep into the mountain. Not only is it long, it's the 5th deepest cave in the country. Even getting to the cave is a challenge. Not only is it far in the backcountry, but to get to the entrance, cavers have to ski for about 12.5 miles, sometimes pulling sleds with gear. If the conditions are right, they can also take a helicopter, but that's of course not always an option. Once inside, the conditions get even tougher. The cave entrance has been known to flood during warmer months, so explorers are limited to visiting in the winter. And even then, they have to be careful. The water levels can change quickly, and if it floods unexpectedly, you could get trapped. The cave's layout isn't straightforward either. It has long, narrow passages, and the risk of getting lost is high if you're not careful and experienced. On top of that, cavers often stay underground for days at a time, camping in freezing conditions while they explore. So you're probably not allowed to go here. Only those with special permits from Parks Canada are allowed to enter at their own risk. The Superstition Mountains, just outside Phoenix, Arizona, are known for their dangerous terrain and a whole laundry list of other things, most of them bad. The only good thing said to be hidden here is the treasure. Beyond that, things get pretty ominous. These Superstition Mountains have become infamous for strange disappearances and deaths. Hikers have gone missing at an alarming rate. 4 to 5 disappear every year, according to George Johnston, president of the Superstition Mountain Museum. Among the most famous disappearances is that of Adolf Ruth, a treasure hunter who thought he'd found a map leading to the lost Dutchman's treasure, but he was never seen alive again. After he vanished, a message in a bottle was found that hinted he'd discovered the treasure but had been injured. Ruth's body was later discovered with a bullet hole right in the skull, a mile from where his body had been left. Another infamous case was that of prospector James A. Cravey, whose headless body was found in 1947, tied up in a blanket. His head was 30 feet away. So while this place may not officially be off limits, I'm telling you, you probably shouldn't go here. Vaults of treasure locked away beneath a temple in India, a secret cave in the Grand Canyon said to contain a wealth of ancient treasure and knowledge, and a massive time capsule completely sealed off, not to be opened for thousands of years. These are more forbidden archaeological sites experts aren't allowed to enter. The Padmana Baswami Temple in Kerala, India is home to one of the most mysterious and controversial discoveries in recent history, the treasure vaults. So in June of 2011, when the Supreme Court of India ordered the opening of 5 of the 6 known vaults, the world was stunned by this vast collection of gold that was inside, and other stuff too. There were crowns, diamonds, and loads of precious artifacts which had all been hidden underground. The treasure is so valuable that some consider it the largest collection of gold and precious stones ever found. But not all the vaults have been opened. Vault B, for example, has remained untouched. When officials tried to open it in 2011, they ran into some problems. There was a metal grille door followed by a wooden door and then an iron door that was jammed shut. So they brought in a locksmith, but the royal family of Travancore stepped in and stopped them. But who is the royal family of Travancore? Well, at one time they were the rulers of the kingdom of Travancore, a region in southern India that is now part of Kerala. They still have some say today, though, when it comes to legal matters like this in the region. But why did they stop them from opening the vault? Well, it turns out that the vault was linked to old religious customs and astrology, and opening it was believed to bring bad luck. There is a curse supposedly attached to this door, and I gotta say, if any door is gonna be cursed, it's gotta be this one, right? Look at this thing. Amazing looking. It looks like a death metal album cover, to be honest. In 2020, the Supreme Court ruled that Vault B would remain sealed, and Vaults G and H, which were only discovered later, still haven't been opened either. In 1909, an article in the Arizona Gazette came out with a story about a guy named G.E. Kincaid who was rafting down the Colorado River when he claimed to discover a cave high up on the Grand Canyon wall, about 2,000 feet above the river. He said that inside the cave was a stash of ancient artifacts, and not the type you'd expect to see in the area. No, these looked like Egyptian ones. Statues, tools, there were hieroglyphics on the walls, and apparently there were mummies. Now, on its own, that would be incredible, but the mummies weren't even your standard size. They were gigantic. Kincaid supposedly took a few items and sent them off to the Smithsonian, but the Smithsonian denied ever receiving anything from Kincaid. So naturally, this has led to all kinds of conspiracy theories over the years. Some believe the Smithsonian was covering up the discovery, hiding proof of some ancient Egyptian civilization existing right in the heart of North America, and that the cave was sealed off by the government with armed guards making sure no one ever got too close. But what do you all think? Could the Grand Canyon really have held these ancient secrets from some lost civilization with giants, apparently? Or was this it's all just a tall tale. The Crypt of Civilization is unlike any time capsule you've probably ever heard of. Instead of a small box buried underground, this is an entire room, a massive vault built to last for over 6,000 years. Nobody is allowed inside. It's not set to be opened until the year 8113. The time capsule was sealed up back in 1940 at Oglethorpe University in Georgia, and it was all the brainchild of a professor named Thornwell Jacobs. He was inspired by the discovery of ancient Egyptian tombs and wanted to leave behind a snapshot of life in the early 20th century, hoping that whatever civilization or species existed in thousands and thousands of years would find him. So what's inside this vault? Well, Jacobs and his team made sure to pack a little bit of everything. There are books, films, everyday items like a typewriter, a sewing machine, and a cash register. They also included recordings of famous speeches and radio shows, thinking that future generations might want to hear what people sounded like back then. The idea was to give anyone who finds it a taste of our world, our culture, and our technology. Of course, the problem is they had no idea that in the future everything would be up in the clouds, so who knows if these recordings will really be relevant. Still, it's an interesting concept, and I'm glad the thing exists. The Lascaux caves in France are full of prehistoric art. Too bad you can't see it up close though. These caves have been off limits for a long time. For the majority of the public anyway. Discovered back in 1940, the caves are covered in stunning paintings. There are bison, horses, and deer, all done by ancient humans around 17,000 years ago. Unfortunately, after first opening the caves to the public, the large number of visitors ended up doing a lot of damage. The air quality changed, and then mold grew, and the artwork just started to deteriorate. So in 1963, the caves were closed off to the public. And now, only a select few scientists are allowed to go in. The rest of us have to settle for seeing replicas or images that I'm showing you right here, which are still pretty cool, but obviously they're no replacement for the real thing. They've tried everything to preserve the paintings, but at the end of the day, it's the temperature and the number of people that really hurt the artwork, so they won't be opening it back up anytime soon. Next up, we have the Cave of Altamira in Spain, another incredible site with prehistoric art, but once again off limits. Discovered in 1879, Altamira's walls are covered with bison paintings, some of the oldest in Europe, this time around 36,000 years old. The artwork is so detailed and well preserved, it's hard not to be amazed by it. At first, people could visit, but like Lascaux caves in France, all the visitors started to take their toll on the quality of the paintings. The carbon dioxide in the air and the humidity affected the artwork, so the cave was shut down to the public in 1977. Since then, only a few experts have been allowed to study it, and again, there's a replica you can visit, but the real thing is closed off, and it'll probably stay that way. In Verdun, France, there's a place called the Red Zone, or Zone Rouge, that's off limits to everyone, and for very good reason. This area was completely transformed during World War I, which turned what was once farmland into a raging battlefield. Millions of artillery shells rained down, tearing up the landscape, flattening towns, and leaving a mess of munitions scattered everywhere. After the war, the French government decided that it was just too dangerous to rebuild the villages or to try and rehabilitate the land, so they relocated everyone, and the area was sealed off. Even today, long after the war, it's illegal to enter. The land is just littered with unexploded shells and toxic chemicals, and while they've been trying to clean it up for years, some say it could take centuries to finish. The Ark of the Covenant, one of the Bible's most mysterious relics, was said to hold the Ten Commandments and was built around 3,000 years ago. After the Babylonian Empire conquered the Israelites, it disappeared from history. Nobody knows if it was destroyed, stolen, or hidden away. According to Ethiopian tradition, the Ark is now kept in the St. Mary of Zion Cathedral in Aksum, specifically in the Chapel of the Ark. But only one person, a monk, is allowed to see it. He's considered the sole guardian of this sacred artifact. And some believe the Ark in Aksum is just a replica, but no one else has been allowed inside to confirm, making this place an absolute mystery. The Great Pyramid of Giza is about as iconic as it gets, but for how much of a a tourist destination it's become, it's not easily accessed, even for some of the world's most well-respected archaeologists. Some areas are completely off limits. One of the most restricted zones is the Queen's Chamber, a narrow passageway near the center of the pyramid, and while most can visit the Grand Gallery, which leads to the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber has been sealed off and no one's really sure what's behind it. Then there's the lower shafts. Beneath the King's Chamber, there are these shafts that go down into the depths of the pyramid, and those haven't been fully explored either. In the 90s, a robot was sent down one of them and reached a dead end. Until this day, no one knows for sure what might be further along. Bangkar Fort in Rajasthan, India is one of the most famous and arguably the most haunted sites in the country. Built in the 16th century by a ruler, the fort was meant as a tribute to his son, Man Singh. At one point, it was home to over 10,000 people, but today, the town is completely abandoned, and living there is strictly prohibited. In fact, you can't even go there after sunset. Tourists are allowed to visit during the day, but when it gets dark, everyone has to leave. Why? Well, the place is believed to be haunted, if not full-on cursed. It's earned the title of the most haunted place in India, and it may not just be folklore. There are reports of people who have snuck into the fort at night and just never came back. Others have heard eerie noises, seen strange figures, some even claim to have come face to face with malevolent spirits. So what happened? Why is the place cursed? Well, one story goes that a priest who dabbled in black magic fell for a stunning princess from Bangkar who had plenty of admirers. One day he followed her to the market and tried to give her a love potion, but she turned him down, tossing it onto a big rock. The rock then rolled onto him, crushing it. Just before he died, he cursed the village, dooming it to ruin. Now, Petra in Jordan is probably one of the most famous ancient cities in the world. You've probably seen pictures of the treasury, which is carved right into the side of a mountain. It's pretty spectacular. There's nothing else like it in the world. But while most of Petra is open to visitors, there are huge chunks of it that aren't. There are tombs and chambers that have been sealed off, and only a select few are allowed to explore them. The Jordanian government is really careful about what they let people do with Petra. They don't want any damage done to the sacred areas, and some believe that excavating certain parts could disrupt local communities. There's even talk that there are hidden vaults and treasures waiting to be found.